Is the slides, those slides come up okay, everybody?
Think so, Dan.
Yeah.
I think so. Alison, shall I hand over to
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah.
Yes, I'm going to kick off. For anybody who doesn't know me, and I know some of the faces, my name's Alison Fisk. My eldest son, Ben, has Down syndrome with a severe learning disability and a severe language disorder, and he lives at home still with me. I've been a member of Our Voice, the co-production group, for around 3 years now. Small group of people and carers with lived experience. And we have, together with Sarah, produced the Better Together plan, which I'm sure some of you will certainly know about, which describes co-production and how this strategy is envisioned to work within Notts County Council to produce a real culture change within adult social care. Following on from producing the strategy, we will have a key role in supporting and scrutinising the development of co-production across adult social care in the future. Some of you will already have heard this many times, but anyway, I'd like to just read out the definition of co-production that we're using. And this definition has been accepted by the councillors at Notts County Council. Co-production is not just a word, it's not just a concept, it's a meeting of minds coming together to find shared solutions. In practice, co-production involves people who use services being consulted, included, and working together from the start to the end of any project that affects them. When co-production works best, people who use services and carers are valued by organisations as equal partners, can share power and have influence over decisions made. And that definition is from TLAP, Think Local, Act Personal. Could we have the next slide? Some of you will have seen this COGS slide perhaps many times, but it's relevant here and it's in the Better Together plan, but it's relevant here for the big conversation because the big conversation has come out of the COG called listening spaces. It's really important because we need to embed listening into the culture of adult social care. We also knew it'd be important that members of the senior leadership team hear directly from people and carers what their lives are really like, as well as them looking at statistics. And both are shown in the report that came from the big conversation. To begin the listening process, Our Voice were part of organising the big conversation, and Community Catalysts, who are a group of professionals with experience and skills in people-led social care and health, a national organisation, were commissioned to run the big conversation alongside Our Voice and staff from adult social care. And I wanted to be involved in the big conversation because it is of the utmost importance that people who use services have their voices heard and heard by senior staff. We also wanted people and carers to hear that adult social care had adopted the Social Care Futures vision of a new and better approach to social care. In addition, the questions were based around TLAP's Making It Real statements, which they were co-produced some years ago now, but they were co-produced with people who have lived experience. To start with, a reference group was formed to design the survey questions, the film script, and the forms of communication. This group included members of Our Voice, and we also attended events and we helped with the editing of the final report and made sure that all the themes were covered. And we're now helping to share those results. In addition, importantly, the results of the big conversation are being used in the new Making It Real forum, which used to be the performance board. Two members of Our Voice co-chair this forum, alongside Melanie Williams, the Director of Adult Social Care. This group meets every 2 months and they're able to ask questions and scrutinise work done. They also remind senior leaders why they're doing this work and to always see that real people are affected by their decisions. And Lindsay is going to talk later about how the big conversation is being used to develop the new local account, which is the new name for the adult social care strategy. And that is also being co-produced. Members of Our Voice have been working on the priorities of the local account, which are drawn from the big conversation. Co-production does take time and it is messy. Sometimes we do things that don't work and we have to think again. But from all that Our Voice has been involved in, I can see that people and carers have never been listened to as much as now. I do understand that on the ground, it sometimes seems that nothing has really changed. I personally have the same frustrations with processes, etc. Cultural change is slow and in some cases with some staff, but it is happening at the top. Just recently, I was really encouraged by listening to some feedback from Angela Cately from Community Catalyst. Firstly, she said it was very brave of Notts County Council to publish all of their report. It's unheard of that local authorities allow through all the negative as well as the positive comments about their services. Also, she told us that she was particularly struck by the level of need among carers that came out strongly through the big conversation. Because of this, carers are now a real priority for the Making It Real forum. Thanks.
Thanks, Alison. Could you move the slides on, James? Is that okay? I don't want to spend too long because I don't know who was involved in the big conversation, who knew what it was or who came. So I just wanted to give people a little bit of context for what it was. So this is a vision for adult social care that's been developed by a national movement called Social Care Futures. They are members of the public. They are voluntary sector organisations who are actually saying this is what social care needs to look like. And Notts has actually signed up to this as being the vision for the future that they want to see. And I think we knew when we started thinking about the big conversation that we were quite a long way. We know we're a long way from doing this, but we wanted to use this. And as Alison mentioned, something called Making It Real as the things that we use to design the big conversation. So this was at the heart of some of the questions we wanted to ask people about, rather than things that were maybe about that were more service driven. It was about actually what's people's life like. Could I have the next slide, James, please? So just really quickly, so Making It Real are a set of again, they're like a big umbrella organisation that work with a national co-production group of people, and they think about what does good social care look like, and they do it under six themes. So can people live the life they want, keeping safe and well? Can they have the information they need when they need it? Can they keep in touch with family and friends? Can they organise the support the way they want it? do people feel in control? And what's the workforce like? So are the workforce being supported to work in a way that helps deliver those things? Next slide, please. So those two documents now sit at the heart of NOTS's practice framework. And this is about actually what we want and are expecting staff to do. And again, I'm not saying this is actually what's happening, but this is the aspiration that people are working to. And we use the core bits of this framework to design and ask the questions that we asked as part of the big conversation. Next slide, please, James. So what was the big conversation? There were 7 large events. So we did 1 in each district, and all of those were recorded. We also did 1 event that was for people who use British Sign Language. And altogether we had sort of 207 people came to an event. Not all people in carers with lived experience. Some people were supported and other people brought them. There were 2 online surveys. So there was 1 aimed at family carers and 1 aimed at people who draw on social care support for themselves. And we were also really keen, and we knew that for some people, they weren't going to get to an event and they weren't going to be able to fill in a survey. So we wanted to make it as easy as possible for people to take part. So some of the work also involved people going out and having conversations with people, or actually just listening and recording people's views as part of a phone call. So by and large, what I'd say is probably of the numbers of carers and people that took part, most carers probably filled completed surveys. Most people with lived experience themselves probably came to an event, but it wasn't, that was sort of the split, I think, between it, if that makes sense. Next slide, please, James. So just a bit of a flavour of the events that people came to. So all of them were graphically recorded. And I think all together, so in the total of who took part in the big conversation, I think we got the views of 277 family carers and 265 people who draw on social care support. And there was a real mixture of voices, I would say. So there were certainly people who I think have been involved and we've heard from before, but I think there were also people from different backgrounds, from different regions. There were people who'd come along and got involved for the very first time. And I think some of the good stuff for me was that included going out to and hearing from people in residential care settings too. Next slide, please. So what did people tell us? So there was a wide, unsurprisingly, and I think it'd be unsurprising to any carers, most people who were caring were doing lots and lots and lots of hours a week. That was the norm for most people. But lots of people were living with long-term health conditions of themselves. And actually, I think that came across really strongly, actually, about how people were trying to manage their own health, but also trying to support the health and well-being of somebody else as well. Next slide, please, James. Unsurprisingly, again, and I think for people, for carers, so for carers, 61% said they were not getting any support from family, friends, or other people. So there were a chunk of people that were, but most people very much talked about caring for themselves and needing to, and not knowing where to go. That was a really strong theme from the feedback. Next slide, please. Again, so people were talking about, but didn't actually get any other support from any other organisations. So 71% of carers said they didn't get any other help from anywhere else. And of the people that said that they did, they flagged generally health. So health came up, people were getting bits of support from different parts of the health service. Next slide, please, James. think one of the things that was interesting for me, and I think it's sometimes something we forget about, so of the carer responses, so a lot of people also talked about they were a carer, but they were also drawing on social care for themselves. So there were examples of people talking about having had, having been a carer for a while, but now they were also drawing on that social care support for themselves, or equally the other way around. There were certainly an example of somebody with a learning disability who talked about having had support for a long time, and actually he was now having to become the carer for his family member, and that was something very new. Next slide, please. So what did we hear? What did people actually tell us? So next slide, James. What did people say? One of the things that we asked everybody as part of the survey, these 6 key how ways, they're new. They've been introduced this year, really, to start to get us to move towards, this is the culture that we want to see in our staff and in our workforce. So we care, we behave, so we know when we follow the law, ethics and best practice, that we're trusting, that we trust people to know what's right for them and the support, and that no one way suits all, that we're open about what we can do and what we can't do, about what our procedures are and how we operate, that we're present, we connect and engage well with people, and that we're honest. So if we're going to do something, we do it, and if we're not able to do it, we say why we can't do it. So we wanted to sort of very much benchmark, actually, what are people going to tell us about that as a response, and that was very much part of the survey questions. Can I have the next slide, please, James? So what did people say? So really what we'd want to be looking for is the yellow or the grey responses, so that actually we care, that those are the often or always. But what we have is a lot of orange and blue. And I think when I looked at this and I reflected on that feedback, the one that really, really struck me was that we're present, that actually that people, for me, that people felt like they knew where to go, they knew who to talk to, and they felt, if they did, that they felt like they'd get a response. And that was very much something that I think when we shared this amongst colleagues and other people, for people to start to think about, was very much something to reflect on. And whether that's part of now, whether that's part of coming back out of COVID and people having got very used to working behind tech, but that's definitely something that I think has made people think, actually, what's that about? What does that mean? We need to start thinking about and changing. Next slide, please. So because we based the questions around Social Care Futures vision, we wanted to sort of think about, that's very much about people having a place to call home. So probably unsurprisingly, most carers said, yes, absolutely. They had a place they could call home. They chose where they lived. But I think what was interesting was some of the comments back from people and some of the challenges that carers said that they faced where they were actually living. So some of those were about, people talked about the impact of having paid carers in your house and what that did to people's day-to-day life. People talked about the challenge of trying to work from home and care for somebody at the same time, and how difficult that was and how that had changed over COVID. People talked about financial challenges. They talked about, some people talked about having to run 2 houses, so having to run their house, but also having to run the house of somebody that they were now caring for, and that the impact that was having on them. So those were very much, although lots of people said, yes, we've got a place to call home, there were also an awful lot of things associated for home with people that made that challenging. Next slide, please, James. We asked people, does the support you get from social care rather than a family friends help you to live the life the way you want to? And actually most proportion of carers said yes, but lots of people said no, that wasn't happening. Many people talked about the financial pressures, the personal pressures of caring and the impact that was having on their health and well-being. Lots of people talked about the need for having a break. People talked about, and I think what was interesting was people talked about the expectation that they step into the role. And I certainly remember some conversations from the events for people talking about that sense that you can almost become a carer overnight and not know that that's actually what's happened, because of the way that can be seen if somebody you care about ends up in hospital and comes home, that's a role that, and there was something about that experience for people that felt very powerful. People shared experiences of having a carer's assessment. There were some that were good, but there were an awful lot where people said actually that wasn't a positive experience. It didn't feel joined up for people. People shared experiences of gaps in support and information and advice. So there was a real range of actually what support to live your life actually felt like for people. And the percentage actually of do you feel supported to live your life, there was a similar percentage of people who responded to a question about feeling in control of the support and was it tailored for you. So a significant chunk that were saying no, that's not what things feel like. Next slide, please. So are the people that support you to live your life doing it well? And what this was about was that actually this was very much about people talking about where they were getting support, talking about the care staff that were supporting them. And generally, people said yes, that actually the care workers, if people were getting support or the person they cared for was getting support, that the actual paid care staff on the ground were doing a really good job. What it meant was, what often was there was that there were issues about communication between them, sometimes in the agency that might be supporting them, or there may be issues about actually they were doing the best they can. That came across loud and clear, but that for some, but you know, and that the issue about paid care staff not always being paid what you'd want them to be paid, so that actually it became a job that people could sustain and want to do in the long term. Next slide, please. Do you feel connected to the people and places that matter to you? Some people talked about feeling isolated and lonely and that they weren't connected. People talked about, some people talked about their family and friends and how supportive they were at finding way around things. People talked about the impact of caring on their social life, on their work life, and about the lack of time that they actually had. Lack of time and lack of energy to actually make or sustain some of those connections. I think there were some experiences where people talked about actually peer support, so where people were getting peer support from other carers. That was really positive. And also people talked about some of the places and the organisations that actually were helpful. So there were sort of individuals named and individual places that were significant for people. But by and large, there was a bit of a sense of it was working for some people, but it was not working for an awful lot of people. Next slide, please. We asked people about, do you feel safe? Most carers said yes, they did feel safe. But they also talked about what that meant. So there were, even for people that said yes, they did, there was some really interesting feedback from people. So for some people, that was about feel the impact on their mental health. So, and the impact of that on an ongoing basis, not just in interactions with the council. I think it was about interactions with lots of organisations, but the impact of that continually trying to ask for things and the impact that actually had. Some people talked about a fear of violence in terms of the person that they were living with and being worried about how they'd support that. There were some people talking about actually future-proofing, getting ready for the future and being worried about what would happen. And I think probably the one for me that really struck me when I looked at it and I heard it was people talking about that fear of doing something wrong. So actually, what would, you know, that fear of what happens if I do something wrong, if something goes wrong because I've got tired and made a mistake. And actually, how's adult social care going to react to that? What's the response going to be? And people really, you know, this person really worrying about what that was going to look like. People shared fears for their safety, but also, probably as in that quote, fears for the safety of the person they were caring for, particularly for people with dementia. What was going to happen? How was that going to evolve and move forward? Next slide, please. Information. So do you have the right information to make choices about care and support? Most people said yes, they did. And most people said, yes, they could get information. They could get information in a way they could access and understand. Some people talked about information being really hard to find. And there was a bit of a mixed sense, I think, from information. There were people who were talking about actually the digital offer for finding information could be much, much better. It could be made much, much easier for people to be able to fill things in and get information electronically. And equally, on the other hand, there was also a real chunk of people who said, I just want somebody to speak to. You know, I just want to be able to get through to somebody and have a conversation. So I think there was a mixture of the two in that group of people who said that they wanted something different, or they wanted something to change and look different. Where information was particularly flagged, I think. So I think the needs of people who were recently were supporting somebody that had a recent diagnosis of dementia, that came up really strongly about that information needing to improve. About what can I do? Where can I go? What's the offer that's there? And probably unsurprisingly, I know for some of the people on this call, people talked about being passed from peerler to post, especially on financial issues in relation to the department. So actually understanding charging and processes around that came up repeatedly. Next slide, please. So it's an awful lot of things that it's because it's very easy just to focus on the negatives. And there were people who talked about positive experiences, and often those positive experiences were about the difference individuals had made. So people talked really positively about certain organisations, about Carers Hub came up as a positive place for some people around support, that people got support from family, friends, particular organisations, and had found ways to work through the system. And again, I can't, that bit of actually the care staff, when people had got it and it was working well, the difference that made came across very strongly. Next slide, please, James. In terms of the bad things, so what were some of the things that carers said? So not knowing who to speak to came across strongly. Very much for people when somebody got a diagnosis, it not feeling joined up about what happened next. A lack of trust. So sort of comments like, feels like social workers are keeping things quiet so nobody finds out, maybe to save money. There was definitely something about communication needing to get much better, relationships needing to get much better. And whether that links back into that sense of people not feeling connected, that you're not present, that we're not present, that people don't know who to talk to. So there was lack of information and guidance, pressures on health. So people also talked about the fact that they used to use the GP. The GP used to be where we'd go, where your one-stop shop for finding things out. But that had felt like it had changed over COVID, and people weren't sure what the replacement was in terms of where's the place you go for access into other things. Some people talked about transitions for people moving from children's into adulthood, that was still difficult for lots of people. And financial stuff. So information about benefits, changes to benefits, and information about paying for services and how that worked. They were very much strong themes for people. Next slide, please. So at the events, probably more than we did on the survey. So we asked people about some of the things that they'd like to see. What are some of the things that they'd like? So people talked about better information and advice, people to ask. People talked about family forums, so places that everybody could go to have those conversations. People talked about growing peer support, thinking about spaces and buildings and how they were used. So that idea of sort of a community or a hub place that people could use and access. They were some of the wishes and things that people discussed. And also strongly better supervision and training for staff. So actually how are staff being supported to do a good job? Next slide, please. So what have we been doing? So I guess what I wanted to do was chat, because I think sometimes it can feel as though we've done lots of listening and lots of asking, but for me this felt like different listening and different asking on a much bigger scale with much more focus. And I think for me, certainly in the conversations afterwards, the focus of care as needing to be a focus, I might be a bit biased, but feels as though it's gone up. It's people are much more aware of needing it to be a focus. So the final report got written up by, as Alison said, by community catalysts. It included the good and the bad, and we've been sharing that as widely as we possibly can. So we've been sharing that with senior managers within adult social care, with our staff in newsletters and forums and at events. We've shared it with colleagues in children and place department, because I think some of the things that people raised in the big conversation weren't about adult social care. So I think we've focused on some of those, but some of those things people were asking about were to do with transport, were to do with housing, and were about things that actually we need other people to help get some movement on. They're not within the gift of adult social care to do something about. We've been sharing them with providers, with counsellors with responsibility for adult social care, with district council colleagues, with health and wellbeing board colleagues, and with colleagues across like the integrated care system. And I think we'll keep sharing and keep having conversations, because I think part of what's important to me is that although we were doing the big conversation it's very much that Lindsay will talk about, to develop the local account and to feed into the work that Dan's doing around carers. There was also something about saying we want this. We want people to keep thinking about this. This isn't a one-off. This is something that we want to keep doing and seeing how we're improving. So we're trying to share that report widely. Thank you. I'm going to pause there, if that's all right, I think. Can I have next slide? Thank you. Just for, I don't know whether there's anything anybody wants to ask me before I ask about what we did and how we did it, before we move on to what's happening. And I'm rubbish on Zoom, James, so you might need to help me.
No problem. Shall I put the slides down for a second and see if anybody's got any questions?
Yeah.
No problem. I'll there we go, stop share.
It's a really whistle-stop tour, and I'm guessing most people are here because they want to find out what's happening next, but I just wondered if anybody had got anything they wanted to ask about what we did and why we did it. Or shall we ask Dan to talk about some of the things that are happening?
So Phil's got his hand up.
Yeah,
Okay.
Phil's got his
Hiya,
hand
Phil.
up.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks. Just to explain, I'm a carer for my partner who's got very severe ME and is bedbound. I was just wondering if there's, because as I assume the people who were being questioned and asked were essentially self-selecting. In other words, they'd volunteered to come to the groups and to talk and so on, and to fill in the questionnaires. And I just wondered if there had been any criticism or danger of criticism from that, some individuals might say, well, of course, it's the people who've got negative views who've turned up to do the survey and talk like that. I just wondered if you had any feelings about
Have we had any of that? I I think you can always do better, I think, Phil, in getting out to more people. And I think we tried. So I think we did really try this time to get a wider group of people. And you're right, there will always be people, but actually I really haven't heard that. I haven't heard in the conversations we've had that it's just a small group of people. I mean, I've heard you need to get to more people, Sarah, and grow it for another time, but I haven't heard a sense of feedback from senior staff or from other people that no, this isn't right. You know, I think and I think that's why it felt so important that the report was published as it was published, that this is where we are. That doesn't mean there aren't some good stuff happening, but I think it is that there is lots of stuff and that we want to work on and want to work on together to think about how we do that. So in my head, and I'd be interested to know what Dan thinks, because Dan's the carers lead and I'm not. But certainly for me, it feels as though that conversation about carers and what do we need to do, what can we do to work on, it's gone up the priority list, I think, is how it felt. But I don't know, Dan, I don't know what your view of that as somebody who's been on the receiving end of what you're doing about all this.
Yes, I think this is coming much clearer that, you know, having those better conversations and talking to people and understanding what, you know, listening to what they're saying, it's definitely becoming more important. That is something that's needed, and we'll, you know, obviously I'll talk a bit more about that when we go into our slide, unless we want to start the slide now. Does that seem a good point to move in?
I don't know, did that answer your question, Phil, or have I not answered it?
Yes, I think so. I mean, obviously you've got a lot of people involved, but it was just anticipating particularly questions from senior managers of well, how representative is this survey when it's self-selected? I mean, it's a general problem.
I think, yeah, and I think it is a general. So I think, I don't know, and I probably should, but if I think about the numbers of people who draw on adult social care in Nottinghamshire, I think it's around the 12,000 mark. So, and I think we got 550-ish people who responded. So yes, there were certainly some people who self-selected and came to events, and then we did try quite hard to go to people we knew wouldn't do that. So so going out to particular groups where we just knew, either for geography or for the ability for somebody to fill in a form, just wasn't going to happen, and that felt like a really important something we can grow. So senior managers will always say, yes, you can involve more people, and yeah, we want to do that, but I haven't heard that this is not representative, that actually that carers are not on their needs. I haven't heard that.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting it is, but
I haven't heard that feedback at all. I think what I've heard is the opposite, that actually, no, we need to do something about this.
But I've seen this in the context of other self-selecting surveys that the politicians particularly can rubbish them, saying, oh well, it's self-selecting, it's not an accurate representation, it's people with a gripe. But if that's not happening, then yeah, that's good.
Well, I can't count for all individuals, but as a whole, in terms of I genuinely haven't picked that up.
Good. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this point?
I just wanted to say on that point about how many people took part, that more people took part in this than any other kind of engagement session that the whole of Nottinghamshire County Council has ever done. So we had more people taking part than we did in the budget conversation, for example, the one, I think it was last year or maybe the year before. So they in terms of what senior managers actually thought of how many people we managed to talk to, it was quite favourable. And some of the face-to-face district sessions where, Phil, I don't know if you've seen them, but we had a graphic artist come along, and that artist actually drew a picture of what was said in the session. And there was quite a lot of, even though there was a lot a lot of room for improvement and things that we need to do better, there was also a lot of things that people thought that we were doing quite well. And that's been illustrated on the graphics in each area, and then all of those have been combined into one bigger one. So first time we've done it, probably do it in a totally different way sort of next time, to be decided how we do it. I know that we felt quite sort of positive about the number of people we managed to reach. Sorry, Dan.
That's absolutely fine.
No, that's great. Okay. Shall we go back to the slide deck and keep going? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, James. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Dan Godley. I'm a Senior Commissioning Officer for Lead for Unpaid Carers. So one of the things that myself and other colleagues and not just within our team, but in the ICS and Nottingham City, we have co-produced a carer strategy, which has taken sort of nearly 2 years to get to the point, which was finally approved and agreed back in the spring. So I'm not going to go into too much around the strategy because I think we've already, most people are probably aware of what that strategy is wanting to achieve. But we can share a copy of this again. But in terms of the big conversation, the outcome of what's being said and what carers have told us reinforce some of the key issues and the key messages that we had already previously heard from some of the feedback that we had that helped us produce this strategy. So, not just from local voices, but from regional and national carers' voices as well. So in terms of some of those five key themes that sort of came out of that, which are on the slide there, are consistent with some of the things that obviously carers have told us for the outcome of the big conversation. So I think it's important to sort of say that some of those things that has been identified, the outcome of the big conversation, is we're already aware of them, of many of those key themes, of many of those key issues, and we've already started to identify what needs to happen or what we need to do to ensure that carers are better supported, with not just for themselves but also the person that they're caring for. So I think just to pick out one there, the last one, number 5, being listened to and being able to access good communication and information from health and social care providers none of these are actually in a tiered order. They were just the 5 ones that were most important, but each of those 5 were the ones that were most prevalent. But in terms of the actual strategy itself, the actual heart of the strategy itself is that voice of the carers within the against the 10 key components that was identified in the strategy, and the I and we statements that sit beside those 10 key components, and they were also co-produced through the TLAP Making It Real processes as well. So that is the real voice of carers and what good looks like for carers, and what we are doing in terms of that overarching we, in terms of how we're going to meet those things to ensure that we meet those requirements that carers said what good looks like for them. I'll go into a little bit more detail of some of that stuff that we're already starting to work on. So some of the key actions that are starting to happen is that I think the main one that people will see in the next month is a new carer support services that are due to start, as I say, 1st of October. So we have a new carers hub contract. Again, you know, that the service specification for that had been co-produced. We've got carers involved in marking the tenders of these services. So we've got the Carers Hub service, we've got the Young Carers service, and Young Carers service in activities, and also the engagement and promotion service contract. So that was obviously a big chunk of some of the work that we needed to do in terms of the outcome of the strategy. In terms of who those contracted providers are, we're not able to say at this moment sort of publicly, but you know, we know carers have been contacted around who that provider is going to be going forward. Some of the things we've been looking at internally in terms of our practice, and I know Mary's has joined us today as well, but in terms of and I'm sure she'll be able to say things around the our practice framework, but we are linking in the what the I&W statements to the practice framework. So actually this is what good looks like for carers. How can we ensure that links into our practice framework? So how can we evidence that we're making those changes? So already, you know, we've got a new practice framework to enable us to have you know, better conversation, ensure we are person-centered in our approach, but in terms of carers, you know, specifically that we are having those better conversations with carers, and that we're thinking carers within our practice, and then we'll be able to evidence those changes and improvements through that practice framework. So that process has already started to happen. We do need to improve that other forms of communication and information, ensuring that we've got the right information out there in the communities, to say, actually, this is what support I'm able to access if I'm a carer. These are the organisations that are able to help and support me as a carer. You know, and obviously having those conversations with, you know, the Carers Hub, being able to be linked into some of the things that are offered locally as well, and you know, the Carers Hub knowing who those organisations are and making those connections for carers, and actually our own staff knowing about a lot of those things that are out there. So, you know, and also ensuring that staff have that information to hand, and to help with that, we're introducing a carer champion role in each of the operational teams to ensure that they are up to speed and have the knowledge around what support is available for carers as a local expert almost within those teams. So workers in that team that aren't quite as familiar, if they're not been doing too much work supporting carers, they've got somebody to say, actually, yes, you know, I've got more information or support that, you know, you can for you to be aware of to support the person that you're supporting. Other things that we've been working on. So there is a project, we've been successful in bidding for a project to look at the short breaks, and that is with Social Care Futures. This is going to be called the Panda project, and how we can access and make short breaks more accessible for carers and more flexible. So that is something that's going to start to happen in the next month, and we're also looking at producing or co-producing a new carers information booklet. So many of you will be familiar with the booklet, the A5 booklet with the green and blue hands on the front, which is a county booklet. We're now obviously because we've joined contracts with the city and obviously the ICS strategy, ECN ICS strategy, that we're going to have a joint carers information booklet, which will include city and county services and support. It will be there will be a new design look to it, so it will take on the sort of branding look of the carer strategy page that you can see there, because that includes all the colours of the ICS partners. So but the actual content will be co-produced. So anything in there that, you know, we think that carers think actually this is really useful, or we'll take out things that aren't useful. And I think actually a good one in there is to include that I do need to make sure I send to Helen is the disability, the DRE information within that booklet as well. So we've got that included. We've also got that commitment to grow this carer space as well. So to ensure, you know, to ensure that we get more carers involved in the carer space, that what this forum is about, and get more members to it. So there is that commitment from us to grow. But it's going to take some time for us to implement a lot of the things that's been identified in the strategy. So things like changing practice and culture, having those better conversations, involving all our partners within the ICS, and having that joint commitment to do that within each of their services and teams. But certainly the commitment is there, and we've obviously got that accountability to deliver on this, which will go through the Making It Real forum, certainly within the county. And that's about it, I think, unless I've forgotten anything.
Lovely, thank you, Dan. James, do you want to just take those down a moment? If anyone's got any questions about anything that Dan has just shared with us. No, doesn't look like it. Thank you very much, Dan. If anything does come to mind, then obviously you're welcome to pop it in the chat, or we'll come back to it later on. Dan, are you staying with us?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Dan. Okay, so I believe, is it over to Lindsay for the next bit? Is that right?
Sorry, I was muted. Yes,
That's
thank
okay.
you. Thank you, Helen. Lovely. So great to meet you all. My name's Lindsay Adams. I'm a project manager by trade, and I work in the service improvement team in adults. And I was part of the Big Conversation team that helped pull all of that those events together. So I'm just got a few slides to just let you know what we're now going to do. So the local account, just explain to you a little bit about what a local account is. So it's a transparent report for people, which puts into, I suppose, plain English language, the strategy, the direction that adult social care wants to go in. It highlights quite a few things concisely, though, so it's not going to be a long document, but it'll include where we are now, what we've been doing, what we're doing well, some positive stories and quotes from people. It involves a small amount of data and statistics, so we can actually say this is where we know we are now. It'll also contain our priorities and things we know we need to change. So those priorities have been developed from the themes that we've gained from the Big Conversation. So as Sarah talked about earlier, when we went out to talk to people, all that listening we did, and all the feedback that people have given us about the way in which we do social care, and also what we call our annual conversation. So just to explain what that is, so every year we have an annual conversation, and I suppose the best way to describe it is a peer review from another local authority in the East Midlands. So we invite a colleague local authority in to have a look at the way in which we do things in Nottinghamshire. So we've also undertaken that quite recently. We do it every year, and interestingly enough, the themes are very, very similar, which is good, because what people are telling us about what we're doing and what our peers are telling us about what we're doing are virtually the same in terms of what we're doing well, but the areas maybe where we need to improve. So just going back to the priorities, they've been co-designed with carers and people with lived experience. A lot of members of Our Voice, and then some additional people have been involved in looking at what people told us from the big conversation and proposing what our priorities should be for the next year. Our local account is a one-year report for 2024, and we will refresh it again the following year in 2025. It's going to be published. We want it to be transparent. We want everybody to be able to see it and how we've approached it. So we are hoping that it will be published at the beginning of 2024. I might be grey by that point. And when it's published, we have a forum called the Making It Real Forum. So just to explain what that is, it's quite new in Nottinghamshire, and it's made up from people with lived experience and carers with lived experience and professionals. But we've launched this with it's got a big focus on quality, and it's where the oversight is seen, if you like. So it's really important to us that we have people with lived experience in that board, in that forum, and that's the team of people that will be looking to make sure that what we've said we are going to do in our local account, that there are, how are we doing? What's our progress against some of those priorities? Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So thought just give you an example, show you an example of the priorities. So the priorities are all sit under the Making It Real themes that I think have been mentioned a few times earlier on. So there are 6 themes in total, I think. So picked out this one. So the theme is active and supportive communities. It just gives you a little explanation on the left-hand side of the slide of what that's about, what that theme's about. And on the right-hand side of the screen, obviously you can see what our proposed priorities are in line with that theme. So I'll just pick a few out. So lots of people told us in the big conversation that they wanted to know about more opportunities for employment or education or opportunities to volunteer in their local community. We know that we don't do so well as we should do in helping people fulfill this dream, I suppose, for them. So it's a priority for people that we've identified in the big conversation, and we know that we need to do a lot more in that particular area. So that's a priority that we're going to focus on, and we've already got some plans that are underway that will be highlighted, if you like, in the local account, but we know that there's more that we can do. I know Sarah talked about this earlier, where it's not always in social care's gift to fix some of the things that we've heard in the big conversation. So, for example, priority 3 there says to work with our partners to improve transport options so that people can connect better with families or with their family or their local community. So that's just an example of a set of priorities under active and supportive communities. Could I have the next slide, please? And here's another theme. So this theme's all around flexible and integrated care and support. So this is about having choice and control over the kind of support that people get. So, for example, there you can see priority 1 is around direct payments. So a lot of work has taken place already with direct payments, and we've got experts with experience that have been helping with that. So there's been a lot of co-production happening in that area, but we know there's more we can do. So we need to make we need to look at this, make it easier for people to access a direct payment and do what we need to do to give a person more control and choice in that area. So again, that's a priority for us. And I'll highlight priority 3 on there. So many people that we heard from during the big conversation talked to us about how it feels for them when we review their support. And we had a few positives, but on this particular area, there was a lot of room for improvement, I think. So it was felt quite strongly that, you know, more needs to be done in this area. So again, there is work underway, but we know there's more that we can do to make people feel more positive, have a more positive experience about their review conversation. So that just gives you a flavour of the priorities. There are more, and obviously, as I said, these priorities have been co-produced with experts with experience and carers. But I thought, you know, it's good to give you a flavour of what they look like and feel like. Obviously, we've tried to also make sure it's a manageable number, because there is a lot of work involved in us progressing every priority, and we want to do what we say we're going to do, and be accountable for what we've said we're going to do in the local account. I think that's my final slide. Sorry, I'm not brilliant on Zoom either. I think that's my final slide. So I don't know if anybody has any questions.
I want to just take the slides down for a minute if anyone wants to ask about the local account, but I don't know.
Maybe what people think. I know that I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but
no,
do people think it's a refreshing approach, I suppose?
Do people think what we're doing is good? You know, do you think I know obviously time will tell, but you know, what are people, what are your thoughts about some of the things that we've got already, or we're already doing, or we're planning to do?
I suspect what people want to see is what you're actually doing.
Yeah.
Well, we gave some examples of what we are doing.
Yeah, and
it's a bit early to get the.
Before we answer that, I suppose a bit for me,
Sorry.
I wanted to get across with the big conversation. So I think the big conversation was trying to do things in 3 ways. So partly having the events was that it was an opportunity for individuals to ask and get things action from. Some of those things, I think people went away, and I think the bit Lindsay's talking about is it's the big direction stuff. It's that, what are the big things that we know are big challenges that need to drive how the department's going to work. Yeah, sorry, Trevor, I interrupted you. I think.
Fine, we've got Trevor, and then we'll go to Catherine.
Hello, Trevor.
Hello, and apologies for being late. I missed my blinking bus. Anyway, as you may or may not heard about, I do Codes Roadshows. I did them for the first time this year, and I did them on the same lines as your big conversation. I just tried to. I had a word with Dan and Sarah at the beginning of it, or they approached me, and we organised 3 questions that all the stallholders asked each individual that had a visitor. When I say stallholders, I had 300 stallholders at 19 different roadshows all over the city and county, up as far as Bassetlaw, all around the city, and Newark and Mansfield and all that. At the same time, we collated all the conversations we had, but we asked those 3 questions as well. The one, there's one question: what information or support would make your life a lot easier in your area? And we had 142 responses to that, and most of them are quite different, but all on that theme as a positive feedback. They also what would make it easier for the way you get information and advice, and that generated 136 responses. And then the last of the three would you like information about ways you can get involved and help make services better? Unfortunately, that was only 63 responses, but I would say about 80% of them was quite positive on that. Now, this is the first time I've been doing the Cares Roadshow since 2013. I've done it for the last 10 years. And this is the first time I've ever asked specific questions, because what we usually do is what the big conversation does. It's just have a conversation and listen to what people say, take notes of the keywords, the issues they're dealing with, and that type of thing, and then just put it down there. That's what makes it big, because the information or the problems comes in from every direction. It's like a spider's web, and it comes from left field, right field. You can't do everything for everybody, but you can, when you pull it all together, you can group it slightly, but not completely, simply because everybody's individual, basically. So what I did, I put all that information down over the last 10 years. I've got 7-year database, spreadsheet for a database, but this year I did a separate one, which a single database for the 3,200 and so footfall we had, with 19 different areas around Nottingham City and County, with a payload of 300 stalls, populated by 58 different organisations, all local to City and County. That was a setup, and I've got, I think it's 24 different categories of questions added to the 3 that we asked. And there was one: activities, benefits, dementia, GP, mental health, housing, isolation, learning disabilities, legal advice, money, referrals, social prescribing, support and work. And each one had a various amount of responses, basically, and all quite, some of them was really left field, things that I've never actually knew that people were struggling with, quite honestly. So because a lot of it, they struggle, but they don't know the support is really handy, but they don't know the support's there, so they don't know. Why would they ask for something that they don't know exists? Basically, that's the kind of vacuum that I think we're all trying to fill. Now, this procedure I've done with the Cares Roadshow, I'd like to do year on year. I've done it year on year since 2013, and I can show you I can give you the database with about 3,500 responses or more, all on variable. But I know that one totals. I think it totals 20. I think it's 36 different categories. I've just quoted out just a dozen or so that we've done this year. I'd like to do this year on year. It's not a competition. I want to add to your information, your information, your conversations, the conversations, whatever. Put them together, and it's just there to help. But honestly, and if I can get together with the big conversation leaders and everything else, so we can collate the right questions between us. So we're not all asking the same question, but like I say, the Cares Roadshow doesn't actually ask questions. We just say hello, and then sit back and listen and take notes of the conversation, much like I think the big conversation has done, simply by letting people loose and just deal with the aftermath, so to speak. And so that's what I've been up to. That's what I want to give as a gift. I'm selling none of this. It's all free and it's open, and it's up for grabs. So
thanks, Trevor.
I know where I want to go with this.
Yeah, I mean, with the big conversation, it obviously we did ask questions to carers, but we also asked questions to people that are drawing upon services. So it was a two-prong approach, not just carers, it was people aimed at people drawing upon services as well. We wanted to do it as a joint thing. But I'll let Dan, I'm sure Dan would be very interested in the information that you're gaining from the Carers Roadshows. And I'm very familiar with them, Trevor, because I used to work for Carers Trust. So you obviously
Yes.
don't recognise me.
I do now, yes.
I've been involved in your Carers Roadshows for a number of years.
That's right, I'm
And so
sure, that's
I
true.
know how long you've done them and how passionate you are about it. And, you know, it's great that we're gaining feedback, especially from carers, from all different, you know, the
Absolutely.
point that I think it was, I can't remember his name, was it Phil, made earlier about making sure we reach as wider group of people. So
That's right.
thank
Totally.
you.
It's not
Thank
just
you.
care, it's people that need help
Yeah.
right across the board.
Catherine, you put your hand down. Is it
No,
it
no,
gone?
it was only really a quick one to say, sorry, I've lost track now, but obviously what you were saying was positive, and I didn't, you know, I think a lot of people just feel it's, you know, talking about it, and it's what Sarah said, doing it. And Adrian and I were heavily involved in the co-production with disability related expenditure. And we're aware that it takes a good couple of years for things to really start to improve. But as long as you've got people like us, Adrian, me, at your heels, it will happen. But it's ensuring that that co-production continues, and that you've got people like us who, and, you know, regarding Notts County Council, Bridget Shilton was wonderful, and we still meet with her regularly. And we've developed a really positive relationship, and that's what can come out of it. So, you know, yes, do it and don't give up, because it can feel like that. And I think Adrian and I felt like that a little bit with DRE, didn't it? But, you know, it does work, and it's wonderful when it does work. So
thanks for saying that, Catherine. And I do really hear what you're saying. I think me and Sarah we felt very strongly about not listening, taking all this listening and not doing anything with it. Sarah and I both were very determined not to let that happen. But even, you know, wider colleagues now that we've shared the report, I think are starting to understand the value of how we've done what we've done. So it's might be classed as brave, but it is transparent. And, you know, let's hope the Making It Real forum as well will be the forum where we're held to account, I suppose.
Yeah.
As well as like, you know, your group here, we're held to account in a number of areas.
And I think it's a reality for a culture change with a lot of staff that work for Notts County Council. That takes a long time, but it has to start from the top and go down. And that's what we're saying. And that's a really good positive, because you can't send it up. You can only.
No.
That's great, Catherine. Thank you. Adrian?
Yeah, it was just a question for Lindsay, just as a clarification, if that's possible. I know we talked about the carers strategy, which is covering not only Notts County Council, but also Nottingham County and the Integrated Care Board. And the carers and the people who use the services find that they're looking at support which is across the whole of these areas. I was just interested in, when you look at the local account, is that going to take things like that into account? Just thinking now of, you talk about reviews, but if you have continuing healthcare, that covers not only the social worker within the county council, but it also covers the integrated care boards are now doing their implementation of their reviews on the health side if you're involved across it. So would the local account cover the whole thing, or is it purely within Notts County Council?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, to make, Adrian, at the moment for this first year, 2024, it is only social care within Notts County Council. It's actually just a focus on social care rather than social care and public health, because we're one department, but with the listening events we did were very focused on social care. However, as you'd guess, we captured all the listening. So if our listening wasn't about social care, we still captured it. And if we think the priority is makes a big difference to people, we've added it in, like transport, for example. But I think it's a good point on the reviews. I'm not sure. I suppose I'm not close enough to them to comment accurately on where.
You want me to add something, Linz? I'm just thinking about that. So I suppose, Adrian, what I was thinking is very much, I think, some things I think within our gift to fix, because they're about social care. Those are odds, they're things we need to work on. Some things, you're right, are about building relationships and connections with partners and other people, and making things join together. So you're right, when you get into something like continuing healthcare reviews, that's a cross, isn't it? So there's something about getting our own bit in order and our own house in order and building on that. But at the same time, equally, I think with carers and other people influencing or trying to influence what happens with that wider connection. So I suppose it's about trying to develop a way of working that starts to do that, but it isn't gonna, I mean, as Catherine said, that's just long-term stuff. But yes, it is about influencing the system as a whole. But the local account can't be accountable for the whole system because that's not within its gift to do, I guess.
No. Fine, thanks.
Okay, thank you.
And I think one of the strategies trying to do, Adrian, is to try and influence the whole ICS to think carer. So if we can get the whole ICS and all the services and teams that sit under that to think carer, then we'll be able to move forward and we'll have hopefully more of a consistent approach.
Okay, well, thank you, Dan. Right, we'll go to Trevor, and then I'm conscious of time, and we've got another question for you all after this as well.
I'll be quick. I mean, first of all, I'd like to say, I mean, Dan's got his finger on the button, and he's very clever, and he knows the problems inside and out, and he's a really clever guy. But in answer to Lindsay's,
I'll pay you later. Thank you, Trevor.
Checks in the post. Okay. The actual big conversation and what I do with the Carers Roadshows and the data I put there. It's the data that decision makers are using at the moment is old data, pre-COVID, probably right back as far as the last census, which is 2012 or somewhere around there. It's old data, and they're making the decisions based on old data. They've got the 5-year strategy, but that'll have to be checked out as it progresses, because we live in a very uncertain world. And because of that, I think the decision makers need better data, more local data, more up-to-date data, and that's what the big conversation is collating. That's what I'm collating with the roadshows. Whether you call it data, whether you call it conversation, it's all the same. It's getting in touch with the local people, find out their local leads, and spend your money more accurately and more cost effectively. The decision makers need this information just so they can get the job done. So I think that influence is very real. And if it's put this way, we're there to help them to do their job a lot better, simply because COVID's left us in a completely different world, a totally different world where you've got a war in thousands of miles away, but it's affecting people on the street with the gas bill and food not being supplied and the costs and everything else. So it's a different world we live in, and we've got to adapt. And I think the decision makers need better information, and that's what the big conversation is doing, and what the roadshow is doing. If we can amalgamate and give them the information that they need to be more accurate, it's a winner. And that's a game changer. That's the culture change, and that's what we need to chip away at quite vigorously.
Lovely, thank you, Trevor. Okay, so Sarah, we're back to thinking about what what next, and how can we find out more?
Thank you. I'd reminded me we've got something else to do.
Yeah. The last little bit.
Can you put the slides back up? Is that okay?
Thank you, James.
I think this was you, Alison, wasn't it?
Yeah. I go back one. That one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alison.
Yeah. Yeah. So Our Voice have been thinking about and working out the best way to get more people involved with co-production and how we can all work together. And this slide shows some of the things that we've thought about. You can see them there. We're also talking about setting up a co-production network to include anyone with lived experience, facilitated by the co-production team and Our Voice. The thoughts are that we would meet every couple of months in different parts of the county, and it would aim to be a space where we could have informal conversations about co-production, sharing information and helping to move co-production forward within adult social care. We are having a meeting in November, which Melanie should be able to attend, for anybody who's been involved in co-production to reflect on what's been learnt and how we can get better at co-production. Our Voice is remaining, but it doesn't mean that people can't join in if you're interested in working at that more strategic level. There's room for more, and essentially everyone is welcome to be part of co-production. Yeah, that's me. So,
Catherine, have you got a question? Have you?
Yeah, it was just, how do we get to hear, like Alison said, there's a meeting in November, but when will the invites go out and etc.?
When will the invites go out? They are, yeah, you will be invited because I have you on my list. Send them to. So I think just to let folks know, so we talk about a co-production team. Historically in the county, that's been me. So we've now got other people starting to join. So we've got a bit of a chance to reboot, reset, and think about what's the best way of doing this. So I'm really keen that we pull everybody in that's been involved in working on things, sharing feedback, sharing learning, and think about actually what do we want to work on together the next year. How can we better connect things, so that you will get that invite through. And if anybody else wants it that's on the call, they're welcome to come along to that too.
Just the earlier the better, with diary commitments, and then I won't book anything in because I've been like prioritize it.
Fabulous, thank you. So I suppose what we're keen to do is think about actually if we can get people, how do we better share information? So one of the things I keep hearing from people is, how do we know what's going on? How do we know? How do we find this out? And it's really hard to find one way that works for everybody, because what works for one, and we think we found that really with doing the big conversation, what worked well for one group of people doesn't work well for another group of people, and people want to be involved in different ways. Some people just want to know what's happening, so they know it's happening and where they can go. Some people want to get involved because they've got a particular thing they're passionate about. And some people, like some of the people on this call I know, want to get involved because they want to change the whole system. And how can we chip away at it at that level too? So I think what we were trying to do here is saying we're trying to come up with lots of different ways. And what I'd be really encouraging is if people want to chip away at stuff with us, then please let us know, and we'll try and find a way that works for you with that. Can you stick me the next slide up, please, James? So we're stuck on a couple of things, because I know a lot of people will have seen the big conversation final report. If you haven't, you can find the link to it there with the details of that. And there's also an opportunity we will be trying to grow an e-bulletin. Now we've got a few more staff and another member of staff in post to let people know about some of the things that are coming out of that. And we're also going to be adding some more stuff to the co-production web pages too. So those are two things people can follow up if they want to get in touch. You'll find contact details on there too.
The PowerPoint from today will go up onto the Carers Space Knox website, and James will put a link out on the social media when it's all there, along with the video of the session as well, everyone. So you'll be able to find those links again.
Thanks, Helen. Next slide, please. So finally, I guess the bit we wanted to ask you about was what can we do to best share some of the work that is going on to try and make things better for carers, because there are lots of things that I know Dan's involved in, other people are involved in. What are some of the best ways we can do that, so that actually we're letting people know about some of those changes and improvements. And the other bit for me is what are the ways to provide and provide opportunities for carers to get involved in ways that work for them. They were the things I wanted to ask about. So I think you can probably stick the slides down, James, so we can.
Lovely. Okay, and James, do you want to share with people one way in which they can tell us that information?
Yeah, absolutely. We've just come up with a short survey asking about preferred ways of being kept up to date. So I'm just going to paste the link in the chat now. So if you have the time to fill that out, that will be greatly appreciated. And if you don't manage to do it now, I'll send the same form or a similar form out to the mailing list as well. So the people that weren't able to make it today also have the opportunity to give their views.
Lovely, thanks, James. So feel free, everybody, to either fill that in now, or if you've got any thoughts that you'd really like to share right now in terms of those questions that Sarah just put to us, how to find out more and stay in touch and get more involved, then feel free to shout up, although I am aware it is 3 o'clock and that's our time for finishing. I want to say, on behalf of the Carers Space Planning Group, a big thank you to Alison, Sarah, Dan and Lindsay for the session this afternoon. So thank you very much for putting that together for us and sharing all of that information with us today. Like I said, it will all be shared and we'll get it all out to everybody, and I've no doubt more people will watch it back who were not able to attend today as well. So thank you very much. Catherine, you're on mute, Catherine.
On a light note, I just wondered how we join the Dan Godley Appreciation Society and whether. So, yeah, I'm sure you'll pass it on to Sarah, Dan.
Thank you. I'll put details in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
If anybody wants to stay on and add any thoughts, you're welcome to, but otherwise feel free to fill in the form, and then we will share more information following. And thank you very much. Hope to see you again.
Thank you.
Lovely.
Thank you,
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, I'd like to stay in better touch with the Carers Space. So you got my details. I just want to be a little bit closer in touch so as I can. I'm thinking the future more than like 24, that type of stuff. What we're going to do there, and determined to keep chipping away at what we're good at, basically.
You know, it's
communicating.
Yeah, great, Trevor. One of the things that I've just thought, Trevor, you're very well connected and well known in the county. Lots of different groups. Can you help try and get people to be joining some of these things that we're working on and be part of Carers Space? Because it is a challenge to get the right people involved.
Well,
when we're trying to find carers we've got this piece of work, we actually, it is quite a task to find carers, and we understand it's a dedication of time, and but yeah, we want more people, we want more carers and other people involved.
Yeah, usually when I talk to carers and other organisations for that reason that know carers as well, it do it in conversation, not just an email. Just give them a ring and that type of thing, and then give them some detail that way. But it's different people have got different buttons to push, and I can certainly attempt to do that. You know, I've got 130 different organisations, but there's a multitude of carers on the back of all these that they all know basically. So I'll certainly my level best to actually increase the membership, but also I'd like to be closely involved as well, because we finished up kind of doing the same bloody job. You know what I mean? So we've both been going down this path, you know, parallel to each other. And I think it's time that we kind of got together and then pool as resources, basically. My resources are quite meagre to yours because you've got the backing and everything else and resources for that. I can add to it and manage chip in a way. But like I say, I'll use the people who know influence is the best way I can to get some to get a better membership, a more broader membership on the carer space, and to put it forward. I've not gone down that road before, so I'll embark on that now, basically, and I'll do it over the next. But when's your next meeting for the carer space? Or can you send me a full list of that on email wise, and then it puts me bang into it. I've probably got it because you spent. I've got emails from you before, and I'll love a look down there. But I'd like to come to each and every meeting, but I can ask other people to join in on certain dates. Then you see that would bring them in.
Yeah,
get them on board.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, Trevor. We'll be in touch with all of that as well. Okay.
Try and keep away from the skeptics.
I'm gonna jump off.
Thanks,
so if you need anything, I'm sure James can hang around for a minute, but I need to go and retrieve my children from school.
Oh, right.
See you later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Helen.
Cheers, Alan. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you.
Something similar.